How to turn a $50,000 offer into a $1.7 million settlement.
Hi everyone, my name is Eric Mausner. This is my law partner Tom Graham. We are Mausner Graham Injury Law, personal injury lawyers in Miami, Florida. Thanks for stopping by. On this channel we talk about various issues, tips, problems, news, all kinds of things related to personal injury law.
So, I think one of the hardest parts about our job is that we get calls from people that are just facing probably like the worst thing that has ever happened to them, or, possibly the worst day of their life. And then we have to talk to them about it and get details and tell them what basically our opinion is, what we think, and if we can help them. And oftentimes the worst calls are when you can't help someone because they're just struggling so hard and they're going through a devastating moment. Maybe they've lost the person they love most and they don't want to hear that nothing can be done, right? They want to hear that they can be helped. And we've over the years had a lot of cases that have started out where other lawyers maybe have said we can't help you, or we've taken a look and said this is really, really hard. It seems really hard on the facts. Talking about liability, it seems hard to establish liability, and we've been able to take those cases and make them into something that is life-changing for the individual that suffered the loss. And I think those are probably my proudest cases when we do that, And recently we had a really big win on one of those cases that was, I would say, nearly an impossible case. At the very beginning, they told us we're never going to pay you anything more than $50,000, something really small. And this was for a young man that got killed. So to put it in perspective.
I would agree with you. I think a lot of we've had quite a few cases that other firms have turned down for challenging liability issues, or perhaps they didn't do their due diligence and figure out a way to recover money, and to whether it was active insurance, or maybe the damages, the injuries didn't fit their criteria, and we've been able to take some of those cases and turn really good results. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the case where we took a $50,000 offer and turned it into a $1.7 million result. We'll call that case John Doe, just for purposes of confidentiality and protect the client. But that case came to me through a friend, and that was an ultimate low point for that person. And my initial thought was, how did this happen? What are the facts surrounding this awful death where a young man was shot and killed?
And this was before we were even law partners.
This was actually one of the first cases we had together, maybe the second or third. But so in that case, a young man was suffering from a mental breakdown, manic breakout. We don't really actually know what it was because unfortunately he got killed, but he was going through a mental crisis of some sort, and he went missing for half a day. And he ended up on a city public bus, a county bus. Was it in North Miami area?
Yeah.
And it was during COVID, and he was on the bus, and it was about 7 a.m. Nobody else was on the bus, and they were instructing him to get off the bus. I believe they're also instructing him to use a mask as well. I think that was another issue, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So ultimately, our client was instructed to get off the bus. He got off the bus, and then he ran into the car of a supervisor. The supervisor and the bus driver ended up getting him out of the car. He ran back on the bus. So his behavior was erratic. And I believe security was contacted, and security came on the bus, whereby ultimately security pulled out their baton, approached him. He ended up getting the baton from her, allegedly charged at her. And at that point in time, the security guard shot and killed him. Is that all accurate, as you recall?
Seems all accurate.
So it was a tragic incident, and initially we start thinking, well, what happened? Why did this happen? And what evidence do we have? So we soon discovered that there was no video, and that the bus driver and the supervisor were off the bus, and that our only witness was the shooter. And unfortunately, our client, or otherwise known as the decedent, was shot and killed. And just so our audience understands, we don't represent the decedent, we represent his estate. And the personal representative who gets appointed retains our law firm. And that's how it works legally. So we commenced our action, representation, and we started our investigation. We hired investigators to try to figure out what happened. We started talking to the police officers to the extent they would speak to us. Oftentimes, law enforcement doesn't want to speak to you in the beginning because everything is confidential and protected as they're doing their investigation. So they don't even want to talk to lawyers. They don't typically want to reveal certain information. We were able to use our skill and our contacts to figure out what happened and get reports, and get the police officers, the detectives talking to us. Summarizing here is a case that started many years ago during the pandemic. This began a big investigation and a big case that was going to take a lot of time. We had to figure out exactly what happened here. We had to look at the ballistics. We had to look at forensics. We had to look at crime scene evidence. We had to look at police reports. We had to bring in experts. And of course, there was a criminal case going on, and the police had to do their investigation, submit the case to the prosecutor's office, who had to review the evidence. And as everybody knows, these are hot political cases in this day and age where young men are getting gunned down by police officers or security guards. So we started to look at it from that angle. But unfortunately, we had a lack of evidence in this case. We didn't have witnesses to tell us what happened. We didn't have video. And all we had was the shooter's statement to the detective and to the prosecutors. And the prosecutors felt under self-defense laws and stand your ground laws, they couldn't prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. So the prosecutor's office said, we're going to decline this case. We're going to decline prosecution because we can't prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. We believe, regardless of what we can prove, the shooter is going to testify she felt she was in imminent danger and had a right to use violent force, deadly force. Case is over. And it probably wouldn't even get to a jury. A judge might agree. So from a criminal perspective, the case was over. And now we had to build this civilly. And this was going to begin a case that took, many years. I guess I'll transition back to Tom here.
Yeah, so obviously there was this, it's called under Florida law, stand your ground. There was a stand your ground memo from the state attorney's office, it's a matter of public record, but basically saying that the person that shot our client was legally justified to shoot him and kill him. So obviously that's a really hard thing to overcome. And what we did, interestingly enough, one of the strategies on this case, it was almost a little bit like being a criminal defense attorney. We had to break down how many errors there were in the police work to demonstrate that essentially the police didn't do a good job here. They really kind of botched this investigation. They got a number of witness statements wrong. And by demonstrating that, chipping away at what the police did, we were able to kind of shift it from, well, maybe this entire original look at the case being stand your ground was wrong. And then the second strategy, part of it was, kind of dismantle the police case. The second part is show what the forensic evidence really did establish. We were able to show a totally different picture through the forensic evidence with the help of a number of excellent experts that we retained, worked with, flew them across the country to come out here and look at the bus where this occurred at, take scans of the bus, recreate the bus, look at how all the ballistics were in the bus. So we kind of had to create a true picture because we didn't have a picture. We didn't have a footage that would have made this very easy. And when we created that true picture, the entire story of what happened was different. And that's just a very small component of what we had to do. There were many, many facets in this case. Believe it or not, we had to have a lawsuit in New York to get prior employment files. There was an entire component of the case dedicated to how people are trained to respond to these situations. Because look, if you're going to be working around the public and working in places like a bus, you're going to have people that have mental illness. You're going to have homeless people. You're going to have sick people. You're going to have drunk people. You need to know how to react to that. And if you react out of violence, that's probably not the right move 9 times out of 10. So it was a very complex case. We were starting out way behind the finish line, and I'm just proud we were able to change it, show the truth, and secure justice for our client in a really hard case that, frankly, had this case gone farther to trial, I think based on how challenging it would be impossible to say what a jury would do. We put our best foot forward, but it still was not an easy case under the circumstances.
Yeah, I think the case had a serious risk at both motion practice and trial. We could have lost either way, in either part of the case along the way. What experts did you hire specifically?
Yeah, and I'm going to circle back because that's a good point, what you just said. But the experts we had in this case, we had an expert on ballistics. So someone that is going to be able to tell the pattern that shots were fired and where they were fired from, where the person was shot, and sort of where the bodies were, where everyone's body was in relation to the timing. We had an expert, that same ballistics expert was doing work on DNA evidence. We had an expert on security protocols, so how should a security guard act or react. We had an expert medical examiner, so someone that would do an autopsy, look at bodies, and be able to tell what type of wounds the person had. Is it a defensive wound from protecting oneself? That sort of thing. We had an expert economist who made a plan for all the future economic losses that our client suffered as a result of the death. Importantly, this one was critical and really awesome. We had a biomechanical expert and a reconstructionist. So the biomechanical expert was basically talking about how the bodies would move and everything like that. And then the video reconstructionist actually made a recreation based on the physical evidence that we were able to create. And they recreated what happened into a digital video, which was fascinating and it really accurate, really great work. So if any attorneys out there would like the name of that expert, I'm happy to share it. That all of our experts on this case were wonderful. But I really loved working with the video people, and our ballistics guy knocked it out of the park. It was a lot of work though. I mean, we had to get multiple court orders. We had to go and get evidence from the police. We had to get our client's clothing that he wore that day. And it was just a ton of work and a ton of fighting. Even though the other side were very respectful, very professional, it was still a hard fought case. But what you said at the end of your statement there, I think also it's important when you have a case like this, one of the hardest jobs too is counseling your client who they lost the most important person in their life. And to explain to them, I know it might sound like a lot of money, $1.7 million. For the most important person in your life, that is almost nothing. So having to counsel your client as to why they need to accept a settlement like that under these circumstances is challenging too. Luckily, the client here is a lovely person, understood everything, reasonable, and she saw the hard work and the effort, understood the risk, and made a decision that ultimately I think, I wasn't thrilled about it. I wasn't thrilled about having to settle the case. I wanted to go see what would happen, but I think it was the smart move.
I think so too. I think ultimately the lack of evidence created serious risk for the client. You know, multiple experts told us that, you know, we could lose this case. I think the fact that the prosecutor's office declined it was going to be problematic for us along the way as well.
Totally.
I think we had a difficult judge as well. We don't need to go too much into that, but I think the judge we had was somewhat unpredictable.
But I like him.
Right. So, but the point is we had several variables against us in this case, and we had to advise the client to make a smart financial decision.
Also, and on top of that, what outsiders or people that don't live in this world or practice law might not realize, had we went further, I bet we'd be adding 4 years onto this case with appeals, with writing, with all of the work that would entail afterwards, whether we ended up successful or not at trial. Even if we had the best day ever at trial, it would be 3 to 4 years additional appeals and additional work and ultimately prolonging this thing, whereas now our client has closure. The defense and their side, they're done. They have their peace of mind knowing it's done, and ultimately everyone can walk away. Probably in a situation like this, everyone walks away a little bit unhappy, even though we're thrilled with the result because it was basically something out of nothing.
I think that's right. And the reason, I mean, this took us 4 years, and we spent an entire year trying to get records from the NYPD.
Yeah, that was hard.
We had to actually initiate a lawsuit in New York City, Manhattan, to get these records. And that took the courts in New York moved slower than the courts in Florida. And I mean, that's a known fact. We experienced that just to get records. So we had delay on delay here. And if this went to motion for summary judgment on stand your ground or sovereign immunity and then goes to trial with appeals, I mean, this could go on for years.
It could be a 10-year case. So thank you all for watching today. If you've enjoyed this or you find this interesting, please go ahead and click follow, drop a comment, reach out to Eric or I. Would love to talk about this. I'm Tom Graham, that's Eric Mausner, and we are Mausner Graham Injury Law.